for $41,809.45. You have the Bennington Co-op Regional, which is SWIPE, which is the BCRC solid waste for $6,549.08. Blue Flame Gas Company, sorry, for $1,089.89. That was for propane water treatment facility repair. $1,012.50 for Brian Austin is a grant expenditure. COT Systems, that's a grant expenditure for $5,310. Grant expenditure for $7,125.23. Delivery Sales and Service, that is for truck number 4 repair, crank, bolt, and etc. for $4,534.93. Hoosick Water Quality District for $1,440. Linda Sharappa, grant expenditure reimbursement for $1,054.74. And then we have Vermont Computer. We have 4 of them for $1,975, $327.40, $1,037.50, $1,100, and that is for the Elder grant. The total of $41,809.45. Accounts payable 25A is for $3,631.78. This is for Green Mountain Power for $1,852.22. Hoosick River Hydro LLC for $1,779.56. The total again was $3,631.78. Accounts payable 25B. This is for the 2020 ballot articles for a total of $268,740. So can I entertain a motion, please?
Motion to approve warrants.
A second?
I'll second.
All right. Any further discussion? Mike?
Aye.
Bob?
Aye.
Bonnie?
Aye.
Angie, aye. All right, moving right on to Vermont DEC for the update of the PFAs, monitoring in private wells and North Pownal water supply study. I hope everybody has it on their computer and read it. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Trish Capolino with the Vermont DEC, and I just wanted to say hi. Graham, who's here with us, is going to be doing the majority of the presenting for us. So thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for giving us the opportunity to talk to you tonight. My name's Graham Bradley. The state of Vermont 3 years, but I just joined the Contaminated Sites Management Group in September. I'd like to actually share my screen if I can. I can see a little green icon.
I put on screen sharing, so you should be able to do that.
Okay, you'll probably just go onto my screen now, so you'll see my face again when we're finished. Let's give this a go.
Linda, can you turn it just a little bit?
Right. Can everybody see a slide there that says Vermont DEC presentation and discussion at the top?
It looks good.
Okay, good. Now I'm going to try and minimize you guys to later so I can see the slides as well. Yeah, so there you can see my name, Graham Bradley. And I just joined the sites management section. Just so you know who I am, a bit of my background. I had 17 years with a consulting company in the UK and Canada. You can tell by my accent I'm new to Vermont. But I did spend 5 or 6 years in central New York at SUNY Oswego, where I was teaching. And as I said, I've been with Vermont, state of Vermont for 3 years in the drinking water program and now in the sites management section. So Trish suggested actually that I introduce myself at this meeting and give some background on the work we've been doing in North Pownal. So I'm going to give a short update on the PFAS, is PFAS chemicals, the monitoring we've been doing in private wells in North Pownal, and also describe the draft report that you've got there that was produced for us by the Dufresne Group and Lincoln Applied Geology. So that lays out some potential alternatives for the water supply in North Pownal, either private water supplies or a new public water supply. So I don't mind people asking questions as I go through, or if you prefer, you can hold them to the end. We can discuss questions you have there. As we go through, we would be in, this is a draft report at the moment. No decisions have been made yet. I will give some of our thoughts on the proposals as we go through, but we are very interested to get your initial thoughts and feedback on these different alternative water supplies. So what am I actually going to talk about? I've got a to say, just describing the context, the population of North Pownal, the private wells, and what we're currently monitoring. And then as laid out in the report, which I think you received, I'll be going through these 4 different possible alternative water supplies. I think the report actually calls it no action or something like that. I think it's better to describe it as a continued treatment of those wells which we know have PFAS in them, and also continued monitoring to make sure that it doesn't appear in other wells. Second alternative is rather than treat the existing private wells, replace those with new private wells, just for the single family homes. Third alternative is a completely new public water system, which would require putting in high production wells and the distribution system for North Pownal. The fourth option, and I think I saw Mark there from Fire District 2 on the call. Fourth option, which is just to make sure we've covered all bases and looked at all options, was actually, is it feasible to connect to a public water system, and particularly looking at the Pownal Fire District 2 water system. Okay, so a bit of background. The report begins by just sort of laying out the context and what sort of size we're looking at for the system. Dufresne suggested Pownal population from the, I think, 2018 census. They got 3,500 there. Within the village zoning district in North Pownal, there's 134 houses. And then they just did a basic calculation with an average per household of 2.47. We're talking about up to 331 people within that village area. And indications are that we're not expecting the population to grow significantly in the next few years. If you've got more information than me, being local, then please let me know. Okay, I'm not clear what to know about these PFAS chemicals. So I've got one slide. I think it's one slide. Yes, one slide just to recap what they are. It's much easier to say PFAS than the full name, per and or polyfluoroalkyl substances. Fluoro's in the name there. It basically means there's fluorines, the element fluorine connected to carbons and forming these long chain compounds. And there's lots of different compounds in this PFAS group. Two that we're particularly interested in, the so-called PFOS and PFOA. Those are, anyone who knows their chemistry, there's some diagrams there on your right, but I won't go into that. All I'll say is the O stands for oct, which you might know as 8, and it just means there's 8 carbons in the chain. These have been used as a stain-resistant chemical, a water repellent, also been used in firefighting foams. They help the foam spread out. It reduces the surface tension and helps them to spread out. So it's been used to coat furniture. It's been used for clothes, for Gore-Tex, cookware, Teflon, and also in firefighting foams. You can see some of the brand names down there on the bottom right. These chemicals started to be used in the 40s, expanded in the 50s. And once we realized that there were health issues associated with them, they began to be phased out in the 2000s, in the noughties. They have been associated with thyroid disease and with certain cancers. One of the things about these chemicals is that they are persistent in the environment. They don't degrade quickly over time, so they're around and they can accumulate. And we've also shown that they are toxic at very, very low concentrations. In Vermont, we regulate 5 of these PFAS compounds at the moment. And the standard is actually 20 parts per trillion of these chemicals in drinking water, in groundwater. So that's a very low standard. And nationally and internationally, that has really tested the ability of our labs to measure these compounds down to those levels, although we're getting better at it all the time. So that's a bit of background on PFAS. We realized there was an issue in Pownal in 2016. That's when the state started looking throughout the state for these compounds, when they gained greater attention throughout the country. And PFOA, one of those compounds, was discovered in the District 2 well. And so the action there that was taken was to put in a treatment system, interim treatment system, to ensure that the drinking water supply was clean. And at the moment, they're in the process of designing and implementing a permanent treatment system for their well. At the same time, or in 2016, later that year, sampled private water supplies, so household wells around Pownal, and 9 private wells in North Pownal were identified with 2 of those PFAS compounds, PFOA and PFOS, over 20 ppt, parts per trillion, so over the standard. At the time, we were just measuring PFOA and PFOS. As I say, now the standard includes 5 different compounds. Generally, what we're seeing when we're measuring these around the state is PFOA and PFOS are the highest, but others do contribute as well, the 5. So here's the edge of the zoning district. The little red houses there show the properties with wells that had PFOA and PFOS over the standard, and also including the purple little purple house down here. The houses with, that are in red agreed to have a treatment system put on their water supply. So there's a granular activated carbon treatment to remove the PFAS from the water after it comes out of the well before it reaches the tap. It's what we call a point of entry treatment system. So you might see me use that. I might use that word POET now and again. That's what it stands for. It's basically just the treatment system. We're continuing to monitor the raw water coming out of each of these wells, and also the treated water to make sure there's no PFAS in the treated water. At the same time, there's continuing investigations ongoing. I'm not going to about the other investigations today that are going in North Pownal. I'm now the project manager for looking at, there are monitoring wells put in around the tannery lagoons here and also around a landfill site up here at Barlow Gravel Pit. Can you see my little arrow, my cursor moving around?
Yes.
Yes, good. And then there's the Dean landfill down here. So there's separate monitoring wells around those, and there's ongoing monitoring twice a year at those, looking at chemicals associated with the tannery lagoons, but also with PFAS as well. I wanted to say a few words about the monitoring in those private wells that have POET systems, point of entry treatment systems. This graph, here's our PFAS concentration. Remember I said 20 is a standard. So where these lines are in green, the health department has determined that's safe to drink. That's below the standard. Where it's above 20 with the pink background, that's above the standard and needs to be treated. So each of these lines represents one of those houses, and it represents the water coming out the well. We also measure water after treatment before it goes to the faucet, and all of those are non-detect. The treatment system is working. Okay, so I haven't shown that. They're all non-detect. We don't detect PFAS in those after treatment. You can see that the level of PFAS is going up and down between under 20 and up to over 140. And I will be honest, we don't yet understand why this is varying so much from sample to sample, but it just shows that it is important to continue monitoring. If you get one low value, then you monitoring because there may be, it may then be higher than the standard. We're seeing this same pattern of variation in public water systems, restaurant water systems, school water systems, that have been measured around the state. Where PFAS is detected, we are seeing similar changes above and below the standard. So just to set the context for development of potential future solutions, in October 2020, so right up at the end of the graph here, only 2 of those wells were showing PFAS above 20 parts per trillion. And now, by the way, we are measuring all of those 5 regulated PFAS compounds and not just PFOS and PFOA. 5 were PFAS was detected, but below the standard. And 2, during this round of monitoring, have actually gone down to non-detect. Dufresne reported, I'm not sure why they weren't able to sample the well, they weren't getting water at the well at the fire department this particular round. So that gives the kind of context to how many of these private wells are showing PFAS PFAS at the moment.
Graham, can I ask a quick question on that graph?
Yeah, sure.
You said that now we are testing for, and I think it was all 4 or 5, whatever it was. PFA.
We're actually testing for a lot more, but those are the 5 regulated ones. So those are the ones we compare. The added number for all of those 5, we compare that against 20.
Okay, so my question is, going all the way back to the beginning of the graph to where we are now, were we testing the same thing year over year, or did we add more? Did we add more in the more recent years? Add more more items that you were testing for?
That's a good question. I actually have to check. I believe, as I said, it's PFOA and PFOS are usually the dominant ones of those 5. I know early on they were just measuring PFOA and PFOS, and now they're measuring all 5. I'm not sure when it changed, but it's a very good question.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples as we go year.
We're not quite, and yeah, thank you for raising that point. I should check that.
So Bob, we actually sampled everything, but we just weren't regulating everything right in the beginning. So we were collecting data for all 5 compounds.
Okay, so when I look at October 2016, those are the lines represent all 5 compounds, as does October 2019 or October 2020.
Graham, what did you put in the graph specifically?
Yeah, and as I said, it's a good question. I took the data from the report. I would have to, if they were measured, it's probably all 5, but I just don't want to put my hand on my heart and say, yes, they're all 5.
Okay, understood.
Yeah. Okay. Right, so now I just want to go through some of the alternatives that are considered moving forward to address this issue of PFAS in drinking water in North Pownal. The first alternative one is basically continuing monitoring and continuing with these point of entry treatment systems. So just to focus our minds, I've used that same drawing there, that same showing the systems which currently, the current properties that have treatment systems on them. So this alternative is basically maintain and monitor the existing POET systems. They are currently being sampled, I think it's 3 times a year, and we're measuring the raw water, PFAS in the raw water and PFAS in the middle of the treatment system, and if necessary, PFAS at the actual point of entry after treatment. During recent monitoring, we actually haven't had to analyze final samples at the end of the treatment system because the midpoint samples are showing non-detect for PFAS. So this alternative would mean continuing with those systems, continuing to monitor supplies for contamination. So in other words, we would be looking to resample as many other private wells as volunteer to determine if there is PFAS now in those water supplies. And I think this is something that we're keen to anyway now and to see if things have changed since that was last done. I believe there was only 1 comprehensive round of sampling done in 2016. So we should be looking at another comprehensive round of sampling, particularly since we are now regulating all 5 compounds and we know that there is some variability. This, if other wells, if PFAS above 20 parts per trillion does turn up in other wells, then this alternative would mean we would add point of entry treatment systems to those wells. And so they would have to be monitored and maintained as well. Part of this solution as well would be actually reclassifying the groundwater. So this is not the wells, this is actually the groundwater itself. Vermont has a system of groundwater classification. 3 is the default, and 1 is pristine. 2 is somewhere between pristine and the default. So as long as you've got class 3, you can go through the ordinary process for permitting if it's required, for a single house, a family residence, and also for public water supplies. If it's reclassified, and we reclassify groundwater such as in Bennington, where there is known contamination. So it would not be allowed to put in a private water supply without seeking special authorization to do that. That's, I'm trying to use my words carefully here. So if you've got an existing private well now, and you're just replacing it, you can do that without a permit. I know that because I was in the private well group with the regional office program. That would not be allowed if the groundwater was reclassified. And in order to be considered for authorization, put in a drinking water supply within a class 4 area, it would have to be sampled. It would have to be demonstrated that the water was clean, the well was properly constructed, and if necessary, treated. It does make some significant more hurdles if it's reclassified. So that is one reason why it might be better to consider a public water system and distribution system, because it would have significant implications to private well development after it's reclassified. I would say that given that the investigation is ongoing, and we plan to do more private well monitoring, we have not looked at the area of that groundwater reclassification yet. Okay, alternative 2 is similar in some respects, except rather than continue that treatment of wells where PFAS has turned up, we would attempt to replace those private wells. Now, at first sight, that might sound a bit odd, just putting another well into a well next to a well that you know is already contaminated. But the thing is, some of these wells are in the sand and gravel near the surface. Others are in bedrock. And many of these wells, the casing, what happens is you drill the well, you put a steel casing in. For a properly designed well, a steel casing would go down into bedrock and you would grout around it. So, and the well itself might go down to several hundred feet and hit a fracture, and you're pumping clean water out of the bedrock. So as long as that well is properly cased and sealed through the sand and gravel, you wouldn't expect to be pulling potentially contaminated groundwater into that well. So it might be possible to put in replacement wells properly designed into bedrock, cased and grouted, that would not be producing contaminated groundwater. We would have to continue monitoring those to make sure that that situation does not change. Okay, so just summary, alternative 2, continue monitoring private wells. Instead of putting treatment systems on, try and replace ones that have contamination with deeper and properly constructed new wells. This option, well, actually all options would require reclassifying the groundwater.
Graham,
Yeah.
if you replace the well with a new well, how long would you monitor that well?
good question. We
usually do 8 rounds just to make sure that we have stable conditions. So 8 quarters is what our minimum is.
Okay.
So would that equal 8 years? Could you do it 3 times a year? Is that what you're saying?
We do it it would be 2 years, 4 times a year.
Okay, gotcha.
Quarters, okay.
Okay. Thank you.
But part of this option is to continue monitoring other water supplies as well, to make sure that contaminant plume is stable and we're not seeing PFAS appear in other wells.
So just to add on to what Graham was saying, Graham, if you stay on this slide, a lot of the work that Graham has picked up in North Pownal is monitoring the groundwater contamination from Barlow Gravel Pit and the Pownal Tannery. And so even outside of replacing the monitoring wells or supply wells, monitoring of the contaminant plume in North Pownal would still happen. So we'd know if there was change in where the groundwater contamination is migrating, if it's increasing in concentration. So we'd still be tracking that groundwater contamination well into the future, even if we replace a well and stop monitoring it after a couple of years.
Thanks, Trish. Okay, alternative 3. So now we get on to considering potential public water system for the whole of North Pownal. And there was a separate consultant, Lincoln Applied Geology, looked at where we stand the best chance of getting a high production well suitable for providing enough water for the whole village. And this is just a summary slide showing the general areas where they looked. There's 2 possibilities, either the Bedrock Wells, and the recommendation is if it was going to be a bedrock well to look east of the village. There, the rocks are generally expected to be more permeable. They looked at where there might be intersecting fractures, and so came up with a couple of potential locations, bedrock wells. One of the challenges with bedrock wells in Vermont is that no matter how well you research the site, it still depends to a certain degree on chance of hitting fractures in the bedrock that are going to supply the amount of water you need. So you can sometimes have to drill very deep to do that. But those are 2 locations where it's proposed that we can optimize the chance of hitting suitable fractures. The other option is to put wells in a sand and gravel aquifer. So this sand and gravel is, I'm waving my arms around here. I'm used to talking when people can see me. This lies above the bedrock. And because of the geological history of this area, we know, well, first of all, there was the glaciers, and the glaciers melted. And after the glaciers melted, there was sand and gravel deposits laid down. And then there was actually a lake in this area with finer grained silts and clays over the top of some of these sands and gravels. The river deposits, the river sands, are actually over the top of all of that. The reason I'm mentioning this is because these gravel wells would be at the bottom of that pile of dirt, and hopefully would be underneath those silts and clays. Those silts and clays would stop any near surface groundwater with potential PFAS from getting down into these wells. They're what hydrogeologists like myself call it a confined aquifer. Now, the desk study, the work that Lincoln Applied Geology did, indicates that these are potentially confined, but in order to move forward with developing public water wells, where I've got those 2 yellow circles on the western side there. They would put in pilot wells, they would sample the groundwater, they would make sure that those deep sands and gravels can supply enough water and are actually confined, do actually lie underneath the less permeable silts and clays, so that they would not become contaminated by PFAS. But being public water supplies, monitoring would be required anyway. And just a reminder that the Fire District 2 well, we know that has PFAS above the standard from that well, but that is treated. And there are plans under the way for a permanent treatment system there. So those just give you an indication of where we might be looking if a public well goes in. Of course, the other part of a new public water system would be the infrastructure. And the Dufresne group looked at, I don't know if you can see these blue lines to serve the whole of the village zoning area here. They've actually recommended their preferred location for a well is in the sand and gravel, if it can be shown that the water's clean, there's an adequate supply, and it is confined. By the way, I forgot to say that in terms of quantity of water, we're much more likely to get the required quantity from the sand and gravel than from a bedrock well. But we would need to make sure that the groundwater quality is good. So the well would be here. There'd be the distribution system installed, the pipes installed, and but they would require a storage tank with the head of water, and there's more. I'm a hydrogeologist rather than an engineer. The report you've got goes into a bit more detail about the engineering of this. They've looked at the pressures required, potential booster pumps required to service this whole area. And they've looked at 3 potential locations for a storage tank to provide the head of water for this system. And I believe this one at the top of Snake Hill Road was the preferred option. So just to summarize here, alternative 3, the new public water supply and system option, you need to drill and test new wells, either bedrock or gravel wells, or although you'll see when I get to the evaluation at the end, they prefer our consultants slightly prefer the gravel well option because of the likelihood of a greater quantity of water from that. It would require installation of the distribution system, storage and pumping infrastructure. It does require the sort of managerial and financial capacity review to make sure that any water system developed as a fire district or however has the capacity to maintain this on an annual basis going into the future. It would have to be permitted and it would need an operator. Like the other options, given that there is groundwater contamination in this area, all of these options would require groundwater reclassification and given the implications of that. Okay, the final option to cover all of the different bases, the Frame Group looked at connecting to existing public water systems. Public water systems, there's various classifications of public water systems, depending on whether the population is transient or not. So I believe they did look at some of the other public water systems serving, I don't remember exactly, schools, restaurants, etc. And it didn't look like any of those were suitable. So the other obvious public water system in the area is Fire District 2, and you can see that in the northeast corner of this diagram. So that, of course, if Mark's still on the line, would require cooperation with the fire district And there might be a number of ways of administrating that, whether it's a connecting system or an expansion system. But that would require not only the infrastructure, the new infrastructure in North Pownal, but also the connecting infrastructure as well. So it does appear that given the demand of the current fire district and the predicted demand in North Pownal, that well does have a high enough yield. The yield's approximately 100 gallons per minute, and the fire district, I believe, uses less than half of that at the moment. But I think, as you may know, and Mark certainly knows, there is, as part of putting in the permanent treatment system there has been some discussions about reducing the pumping capacity in that well. So that would need to be considered if this option was to be looked at further. So just to summarize, alternative 4, connect to an existing public water system. The one that's being costed is potentially connecting to Fire District 2, construct an extension, install the distribution, storage, and pumping infrastructure. And again, that requires cooperation, capacity review, permitting, and the operator. And again, we expect to be reclassifying the groundwater in North Pownal. How am I doing for time? I hope I'm not spoiling our evening by going on too long. This is actually the last slide I have. And if you have had a chance to have a look at that report, you can see it goes into some, how they came up with cost estimates, preliminary cost estimates, just for comparison purposes, and also an attempt to evaluate the non-quantitative aspects of the different alternatives. There was also the survey done, the public survey of users in North Pownal, and the general. Now, I'm just wondering how whoops, wrong one. I was supposed to have 2 screens, but I've got the same thing on both screens at the moment. Never mind. The general outcome of that survey was that in terms of who would prefer a public water system and who would prefer to stay with the private water supplies, of those that responded, it was pretty evenly split. And the actual numbers for that are in the report. The question was changed slightly and said, okay, there is going to be a public water supply. Would you connect to it? There was a slight increase in the number of people who would then connect to it, even if they hadn't preferred a preference to that option in the first place. But generally, it is fairly evenly split in terms of preference for public or private water supplies. So now looking at this evaluation summary, across the top there, I've got each of the different options. I've divided out the bedrock and the gravel well as Dufresne did in their report. Going down the sides, I'll explain what each of these mean: long-term reliability, compliance, achievability, implementation, feasibility. And I've just put in some ballpark numbers here for costs in millions of dollars. Just so this is the life cycle cost. So Trish, can you remember what the life cycle calculate, what time period that's over?
I'll look for you.
Yeah, sorry, I would look.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have it right here. Give me 1 second.
Yeah. Anyway, so this is over a number of decades. Now, what I would urge you to do when you look at this is kind of perhaps just focus on the colors there rather than the exact numbers, this is a semi-qualitative analysis. So I certainly wouldn't, argue a percent or two here or there on this, but I would look at the general colors. So when it's a darker orange, that's indicating that perhaps that box, it's not so good. And where it's a lighter yellow, that's indicating that it is good. So if you just looked at those ballpark numbers at the bottom, you can see once you get into the over 10 million, those are darker orange. And it turned out that the connection to the existing water supply, the infrastructure to do that, plus infrastructure in North Pownal, comes out very high. So that's the darkest orange in terms of costs. The lightest orange, the lightest yellow in terms of costs are the private options. But you can see that the opposite is true when you look at the public water supplies. When you look at things like long-term reliability, the public water supplies options are coming up yellow. So those preferred in those categories.
So the life cycle cost is 30 years.
30 years, thanks. I was going to say 20 or 30. Thank you. So long-term reliability, you can see there that these are less reliable for the private systems, more reliable for the public systems. And that's partly because then we would be relying on private individuals to gain access. We would have to make sure that each of those individual treatment systems is being maintained. If you actually had a single source, public source and treatment system with a dedicated operator, then we would expect that to be more reliable and for the whole zoned area as well. So then we wouldn't have to keep monitoring other domestic wells if they're all on the public system. With the private wells, of course, we need to keep monitoring wells even if they don't currently have PFAS over the standard in case that changes. So that's come out a little worse, a little darker orange in terms of reliability. Compliance, achievability. This is things like, sorry, I feel a bit exposed here because I was supposed to have the report up on my other screen and I've set it up so I can't see it. But well,
this is all in the report that they were able to read. So maybe
yeah, sure. Well, no, I can try and describe what these mean here. Compliance reliability. So this is things like, permitting, achieving the permitting, achieving the compliance with the long-term monitoring or ensuring we're not getting PFAS coming into those wells in the long term. There's more control over those kind of things with the public water supply, so they come out a little better. You can see each of the options. There's, well, the private wells, some issues with compliance, achievability there. Implementation, this is actually constructing these different options. If you look at the two new public well options, the gravel well has been given a little greater feasibility than Bedrock Well, and that's just simply because we expect the quantity of water to be more reliable in the gravel well than in a Bedrock well. But that does depend on ensuring appropriate water quality from the gravel well. So it's not 100%, it's 80%. Not a huge difference between the implementation feasibility and all of those. And I've already spoken about the life cycle costs. So there's pros and cons. And I think it's fair to say that given only 2 wells had PFAS over 20 parts per trillion in October, although acknowledging that it goes up and down. We want to continue monitoring and would like to we would like to do another round of monitoring of other private wells, comprehensive round of monitoring that do not currently have POET systems, treatment systems, to see if and how that has changed since 2016. We do feel as if we're going to move forward with a public water system, there are some issues to be addressed, and we do need to have a strong case to advocate a public water system, given the costs that are involved, and to get people on board, given that only half of the... excuse me?
So I think I just want to jump in for a minute, Graham.
Yeah, sure.
We were really hoping to have a different kind of presentation for everyone, and not that we're not wanting this presentation, but we were hoping to have more public participation. But COVID happened, and so we weren't actually able to get out into the community that we were hoping to. And since we're at the end of this process, we wanted to make sure that we really tried to engage with you. And I think, as Graham was saying, we're not ready to pick an outcome yet, because we feel like we need more data to support any of the outcomes. So we really wanted to hear what your thoughts were being in the community, and making sure that you had the opportunity to look at the report and ask us questions. I will take full responsibility for not having engaged as much as we should have, but I want to make sure that we hear everything you have to ask us about what we've been doing to date to try and figure out a solution to this problem.
So it's over to everyone else. We can. I just wanted to included a nice photograph. I look forward to climbing up here next.
Bob, I did look, just so you know, we did sample for all 5 PFAS. The first round that we started in March of 2016 was just 3. And then after that, starting in November 2016, we carried forward with all 5 regulated PFAS compounds in North Pownal. So that graph showed everything.
Okay, thank you. Hey, Graham, could we go back to the previous slide, the one that was, you know, this one right here? Yep. So if it's okay, if I hope you don't mind me jumping in with questions.
Please do. Yeah.
Okay. So where it says long-term reliability, is that really that a private well needs to be replaced every now and then? I mean, the reason I ask is because I have a private well, and we've had it since before I was born, and I'm in my 60s. So I'm not sure why that would be so low on long-term reliability.
I can tell you if Graham doesn't know the answer.
Go ahead and I'll tell you if I can add more to it.
It's basically, we have to replace all the carbon filters all the time. And we have to replace the ultraviolet lights that are in there. And so it's that piece of maintenance that has to happen.
I think that answers my question. It's the point of entry system that's the reliability. It's not necessarily the water in the well and gallons and that stuff.
It's the maintenance of the system.
Okay. And then I think that also impacts the compliance. That must be what's impacting the compliance achievability, or is that really a function of whether or not an individual decides they want to be on the system? So one individual out of 7, like we saw 7 that are in the study, one that's not because they refuse the system. They're probably bringing down the compliance, right?
Correct. Yes. So I came out of my sort of screen view. Oh, whoops. Cancel that. Hopefully you can still see the chart on the screen there. and I've opened the table just to check on that. So for long-term effectiveness, the things that had low numbers were things like with the private systems, institute controls over the long. For the compliance, they've got some low numbers because we would require these agreements. We would have to, individuals would have to volunteer so that we can get access to their wells and install the point of entry treatment systems or put in a new well.
Okay, I think I'll shut up and give our audience a chance to ask questions.
Graham, is your presentation done?
It is, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so we can open up to public comment.
Yes.
Out there that would like to ask a question, please raise your hand. Rebecca, is there anybody out there?
Mark, did you want to speak? I see you just unmuted yourself. Go ahead.
No, I was just unmuting. I just, in case something came up, I didn't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't see anyone else.
Okay, does the board have any more questions for Graham?
Well, actually, for Graham or Patricia, I'm not sure. What is the, at the beginning of this, you were talking about the decision, and it didn't sound, I'm not sure who ultimately will make this decision. Is that a select board decision?
So there's a, we couldn't pick, if we chose to pick a public water system, we couldn't choose that without support from the town because the state isn't going to be running a public water system. And unless there's some entity that wants to be the manager and owner of a public water system, then we would like to hear that. If the municipality is interested in doing that, if there's another fire district that wanted to be created, there needs to be some other entity to manage and run and operate a public water system in North Pownal.
Okay, that makes sense. So, and I think I like the answer. I think it puts us in control of our town.
Yes.
Right, and so, and that's a good thing. And I think some of the negatives on the lower cost options, there has to be ways to mitigate those and bring those numbers up. It was what it would seem to me, particularly if it is swapping things out and making sure that you're keeping up with the maintenance and things like that. I'm also looking at that bottom line, and the two numbers on the left look much better than the three numbers on the right.
So that's true. I mean, that the cost piece certainly looks that way, but there's also long-term implications for the residents who have these treatment systems on their homes. We're going into their homes 4 times a year to sample their water. We're the ones who are fixing their water system if it breaks or needs to get changed. So it's not it's certainly not as uncomplicated maybe as being able to turn on their faucet and get water from a public water system. So that that's something to consider, that there are people coming in their homes all the time to take care of their water system. And then the other piece always being that what happens into the future when someone else wants to move in or there's plume migration or something like that. We have to consider changes to that area, which public water would help to take care
of. Right, understood. And then, but it's also the population versus cost, and control. Individuals would be more in control of their own wells on the two left options.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else have any questions for Graham or Tricia?
not seeing anybody with their hand raised.
So I did ask, I wanted to make sure that, you know, you all knew that we just finished our last round of O&M sampling at the Pownal Tannery. So we'll be getting more data back from the groundwater sampling that just happened out there, and also beginning some work at the Barlow gravel pit area. So we are still looking to get more groundwater data to help support whatever decision we move forward with, and hopefully have most of that data back when, Graham, this summer. We should have a pretty good data set.
Yep. I mean, I am interested to hear not only questions, but I mean, we've already got some good feedback there. If anyone else has initial thoughts that they're happy to share, I'd be interested to hear that too. And by the way, with not having been able to see everybody, with having this chart on the screen, I wasn't clear who was providing that feedback there. Who? Do
you want to stop your sharing, Graham?
Sure, I will do.
And then then we can go back to speaker view.
Yeah.
That was Bob Jarvis.
Bob Jarvis. Okay, thank you. There we
go.
Hello again, everyone.
Oh. Hello.
So I think I have a question, Graham. It's Mike Gardner. So when you say the Barlow gravel pit site, is that the operating gravel pit site now, or is that the closed pit site?
So above where the solar array is there was a little valley that was quarried out and used as a landfill. So it's a very small part of the whole.
Right. So it's not the operating, it's not the mining site that's going on now.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks. I need to be careful how I say that.
Well, I'm just curious, because I mean, if we're unsure, you know, I'm not a geologist or hydrologist, but if we're having a hard time tracking the groundwater and where it's coming from and how it's moving, which is what it sounded to me, and if we have a gravel pit mining site that's being used, and my question was, are we transferring all this contamination to wherever the gravel goes? That was where I was going with that. But it doesn't sound like that's the case.
If it's just the gravel, then no. Yeah.
Well, you're right. Okay.
Yeah.
Any more questions from the board?
Yeah, I got a question, a couple of them. You push this is Ron Bizon. You're pushing this public water stuff, and you're talking about how great it is. I've been in the water business all my life. Now, I've talked to a lot of drillers. They don't know what they're going to find. And these people that say where the water is, they don't know where it is either. Right? You got a good aquifer over in South Pownal. I don't think there's an aquifer in North Pownal to start with. Secondly, if you have a public system and you already have chemicals in it, why would we want to hook on to it? I'd rather have a private system, and I only got to buy it once. Buy a pump, buy a tank. For the last 15, 20 years, I got to buy another pump and tank. But I don't have anybody putting chlorine in my water, poisoning me and stuff like that. That's what you get with public water system. So you can see where I'm going. I'm the person that has seen a lot of wells drilled, talked to a lot of intelligent people who drill wells. And they told me that nobody knows where that water is. North Pownal, there's 700-foot wells, nothing in them. All that is rotten shale. And you get out in that valley, that's all it is. So, I mean, you're talking big money here, a lot of things that nobody knows anything about. You can talk about.
Okay, I agree that no one can tell you you're going to get 30 gallons per minute, 10 gallons per minute, 1 gallon per minute by drilling a well to 200 feet in a certain place. We can, as a hydrogeologist with decades of experience. I know we can increase our chances drilling in particular locations of hitting a well that will give us the amount of water that we need. Steve Ravel, who's worked in Vermont for decades, if you've worked with drillers, you may know Steve as well from the Lincoln Applied Geology. He's the one who reviewed the potential locations. And yeah, sure, he agrees that in terms of getting the quantity of water we need, that the gravel well is more likely to achieve that than the bedrock wells. In terms of drilling to the east or the west of Pownal, the geology, the bedrock geology is more suitable to the east in the carbonate deposits rather than the other metamorphic deposits, rocks to the west. So we can increase our chances. Steve is of the opinion that we stand a very good chance of getting the water we need, if that's the route that's taken from the gravel well. We would need to confirm the presence of that low permeability, the confining layer, to make sure contamination doesn't down into the deeper gravel. So there's work to be done if that is an option that is to be explored. But I wouldn't say that we have no knowledge of whether there's water there. We can assess the likelihood of there being adequate clean water there.
Well, I know that Ron knows that because I sampled all 5 wells on his property. So I know you drill a lot of wells, but I think before we'd even be able to say that this was the option, then we would need to do some pump tests in the areas that we'd want to do to make sure that you could actually get the yield that we'd need to support the community. And Ron, you're right, there could be people that just want to keep their private wells, and that's the option that North Pownal chooses, or people want, public system that they don't have to be concerned with a private well. So it could go both ways. That's why we just evaluated everything.
So why can't they put filtration systems to get the PFOs out of their private wells like they did in North Bennington?
There are filtration systems on the private wells that have contamination. Some people have chosen to not have them put on their wells.
Okay, so isn't that, if they choose not to put filtration on their wells, what would you make us think that they would go to a public water system?
So I requested this study personally because the state is in the position of maintaining people's private water systems, which isn't really, I don't think, the best place for the state to be, as set up as their plumber and making sure that their water system doesn't fail on them. So I wanted to know what other options existed for North Pownal to ensure that, anyone could have clean water in North Pownal, that there wouldn't be this long-term forever obligation for the state to be going into people's homes and putting carbon systems on new wells or continuing to change out current systems on old wells. I didn't know that I didn't really feel like a POET system on someone's house for 30 plus years was the best option to select. So I wanted to make sure that the state was evaluating the best option for the residents in North Pownal and for the state to continue to maintain, and then hear what the community wanted and see what the results of the study were. So that's the basis for this, was trying to figure out if this really is the best long-term option for everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Public water supplies, a lot of them are surface, lakes, ponds, whatever you want. Look at Bennington, gets it out of Woodford. Animals die in there and everything else. Comes down, they treat it, they sell it. Is that the answer to the problem? I don't think it is. And I think that was a ridiculous number the state of Vermont has is 20. No other state in the United States has a number that low. So all I'm trying to inject here is a little common sense. You go down here and on the way to Troy, you go across the Tom Hannock Reservoir. What's that full of? Geese, animals walking around in it and everything else. There they are. They send that into Troy and they drink it. They put copper sulfate in there. They put all kinds of things in the water. See, I don't think that's any better than this little bit of PFOA. And also, why would this chemical continue to come? Water's a solvent. Whatever it passes through, it picks up some of it. When it goes through a bed of iron ore, it picks up some iron. It goes through limestone, it picks up calcium. That's where you get your harnesses and things like that. Well, why wouldn't these, if you had an oil spill or something like that, why wouldn't that eventually go away? And we never used any foam in North Pownal. At that fire department. Okay, and that were just some things that remarks that I had to make.
Any other questions or comments from anybody?
Well, I guess I have another comment. Is I did see that I don't want to speak out of turn, but I did see that a connection to Fire District 2 was an option, and I thought that was eliminated as an option. But I could
understand. I do believe they don't want no part of it.
That's what we've been told, but we asked that it just be in there so we could evaluate whether or not it was what the option looked like financially and long term. So the fire district has told us that they weren't interested in expansion. Unless Mark's changing his mind.
No. Oh, his mind.
All right, then. Thank you so much for your presentation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll second that. Very much appreciate you coming in.
So I'll have a good thank you.
So Trish, hi, it's Linda. What will be your next steps?
Did you say what will be our next steps?
Yes, after tonight.
So we're gonna finalize the report with Dufresne. If you have any comments, we'd love to hear them related to what the report said, and if Graham's presentation changed any of your thoughts on it. And then our hope is to reevaluate the options after we get the data set back from the groundwater and supply well sampling that we're doing. So I think, you know, we might be back to talk with you, or if you want us to or not, sometime in the summer when we get more data to share and look at what we're thinking about the extent of contamination is, if there are other spots or homes in North Pownal that should be sampled as part of this sampling event.
Okay.
I will say, you know, just big picture process for the state. We are really working closely with EPA right now to try and get them to reevaluate North Pownal tannery to look at PFAS as a source from that location and potentially bring some assistance to us in that evaluation. And Ron, to your question, you know, if there's still a source of PFAS in the soil and in the groundwater, it's going to continue to cause contaminant issues long-term because it really doesn't degrade at all. So if we can find where some of those sources are and potentially remove them or stop them from migrating, then that will go a long way to, you know, not having a long-term groundwater contaminant issue in North Pownal. So that's one of the goals that we have.
Okay.
If you are interested in any particular issue, my presentation was just an overview. There's a lot more details in the report. I see Chrissy has joined us. Chrissy Haskins, the manager, who managed the production of that report.
Oh, I do. I'm sorry. If you don't leave quick enough, I will always have another question. The only question I have is that report. I think we did get a PDF distributed. Did you have that in Word format so we can search it and that sort of thing? I mean, it was a scanned copy, and it came in at like 58 meg, and it's all a picture, so I can't look for keywords to kind of search it. It's a pretty long report. I was just wondering if you had it in Word format. That's all. Or the original PDF format that was created from a Word document. That would also work because then it's text in the PDF. But what we currently have was a scanned document, I believe. At least what the board had. Maybe.
I can give you a copy, Bob. I printed one out for Ron tonight.
Oh, I see.
Oh no, I don't want a hard copy though. I want something.
Oh, you don't want a hard?
Yeah, no, I wanted a soft copy that had text in it instead of a scanned picture. That way I can search on text.
So Bob, you've got a scanned version of a hard copy. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, it came from me.
Okay. I think we can provide the original PDF. So that.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, are we all done? Say good night to Graham and Trisha, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Nice
Good
to meet
night.
you, Graham.
Thank you.
Good to meet everybody here as well. Thank you.
Nice
And
to meet you.
including you, Linda.
Yeah, I'm Linda.
Yeah,
Linda, we
thanks.
have a good minutes.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Minutes.
Hold on. Let's back up.
I don't think I did. I think I skipped right over it.
Minutes.
No, I guess we skipped.
Okay, I'm sorry, guys. I skipped over minutes from 12/10/20. We need to make a motion to approve that.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes from 12/10.
Okay, Ronnie, second. Any discussion? Mike,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Ronnie,
Aye.
Angie, I.
Good catch.
So that's it. Anything else to come forth?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Mike,
Aye.
Bob,
Aye.
Ronnie,
Aye.
Angie, I. Thank you, everybody. And if I don't see you, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holiday.
Good night, guys.
Thanks, Angie. You too.
Merry Christmas,
and
everyone.
everybody.
Hi, Merry
Merry
Christmas.
Christmas.